All right, so now coming to the stage is Saara Dutton. She is a writer, performer, and gadfly about town. She's been published in the New York Times, the New York Observer, Salon, and Writer's Digest. She's happy to be here to share a story with us today.
There we go. That's the dwarf level there. Okay, excellent. I just wanted to tell you in advance that I wrote this a while back when I read a very peculiar story in the LA Times, and I think that now we're all thinking about the City of Angels. I see this as a very peculiar and strange love letter to LA. I hope you do all as well. So let's go with a little bit of prose here tonight, not poetry but prose. This is called The Last Gasp. The murky La Brea tar pits bubbled and belched under the midday Los Angeles sun. Thousands of years ago, the wind would blow leaves and grass across this tar, forming a layer of camouflage and creating the illusion of solid ground. Animals fell for the con. They'd wander in, struggling when they realized that they were trapped, crying out as they sunk further and further into the pit. The noise would attract nearby carnivores sensing easy prey. They'd pounce on the drowning victims, only to become trapped and die in the tar themselves. Now, overfed tourists snap photos behind this chain link fence that surrounds it and contains the sticky black pools. This fence that transforms them from death trap to tourist trap. But even through the lens of the camera, aimed between the diamond-shaped openings, the tar pits maintain their deadly lure. Because the tar can't be contained completely, some of it still seeps under the fence, occasionally coating the soles of children's shoes, as if trying to bring in new victims. And today, next to that chain link fence, near a slow trickle of hot tar, sat a pair of lungs. A security guard from the George C. Page Museum had stumbled across these lungs and called the LAPD. Now Detective Thompson arrived on the scene, chewing some dried apricots that he always kept in his right pocket. He bent down and frowned. As he scanned the lungs, he considered the pathwork of cells forming millions of air sacs, separated into lobes by fissures, further and further divided into connective tissues and into more lobules and more hexagonal divisions, smaller and smaller and smaller subdivisions. He once read about a woman who was on a waiting list for a very long time to get a lung transplant. After 2 years, she finally received that pair of secondhand lungs. When the operation was over, she was told that the used lungs had been donated by someone who had smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day for 25 years. Detective Thompson glanced at the tar pits and sighed, realizing that he had gotten off track once again. He just couldn't help it. His thoughts tended to wander. It was a problem that led to his embarrassing nickname at the police station. Thompson, he can't get straight to the point, said the chief one afternoon. That asshole always takes a detour to the crime scene. Everyone laughed a little too heartily, and after that, the name Detour stuck. He ate another dried apricot, staring at the two halves of the lungs, knowing that they weren't actually the same size, even if they looked that way. There's nothing more unreliable than an eyewitness. So why were these lungs here in Hancock Park, next to the tar pits? How the hell did they get here? I mean, there was no blood surrounding the lungs, no signs of struggle, no evidence of any sort of crime. They just seemed to have been discarded, maybe displaced. Were these lungs part of a collection, an internal organ black market, a weird ceremony, a secret society of gourmands who ate seasoned pulmonary arteries? Fuck, he didn't even know if they were human or not. Detour Thompson stood up, pushed back the shaggy blonde hair off his face, and watched as the lungs were packed up for delivery to the coroner's office. They looked lonely. He chomped down another apricot and winced as pain shot through one of his molars. The pit was still in it. What the detective didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that this pair of lungs had been in LA for a very, very long time. They were, in fact, collective lungs. In a city connected by freeways and expressways, branching into intricate patterns of highways and superhighways, the bronchial tree of these lungs had been breathing for all of Los Angeles. It was a communal respiration that had continued for many, many years. Over the decades, these collective lungs had enjoyed the fragrant orange groves in the Los Angeles basin before the trees were cut down and the land was paved for asphalt to create suburbs, which sprawled into subdivisions, dividing into smaller and smaller subdivisions further and further out. They had breathed steadily from movie moguls and air-conditioned, air-freshened boardrooms where big deals are made and also lost and windows don't open. They inhaled the good BO of a hit movie, took in the disguised disappointment during the third hour of the Academy Awards ceremony. They sighed in 1932 when failed actress Peg Entwistle leaped off the H of the Hollywoodland sign, and they whispered conspiracy theories when successful actress Marilyn Monroe overdosed in 1962. They fainted over a drunken Lizard King at the Whiskey a Go-Go, cheered when Mickey Mouse got a star on the Walk of Fame. The lungs wheezed through smoke from riots, wildfires, hill fires, brush fires, and the lingering dread sailing in on the Santa Ana winds. Sometimes they accidentally inhaled stolen water from Owens Valley. They endured unsettling boredom under the unrelenting sun, breathing for people with nothing better to do than sit by a chlorine-drenched pool that they'd never really own, but continued to pay on a never-ending installment plan, rationing what little emotion they felt for fear that it might leave permanent evidence on their face. The lungs had screamed from the kitchen of the Ambassador Hotel in June of 1968 when Robert F. Kennedy was shot, and then choked on the fumes and the airborne particles of unexamined clues as it was demolished in 2005. They had sensed the bizarre foreboding that befell LA during that dark August of 1969, when the Manson murders finally ended the summer of love, and people began building gates and security systems around their previously unlocked mansions, trying to shut out the fear with locks and alarms, creating hidden worlds behind those gates. They never quite felt safe again. The lungs struggled for air during the Hillside Stranglers' grip over the city and held their breath as the Night Stalker turned sundown into a death sentence. Over the years, they sucked in smog, sweet stripper perfume, minty fresh realtor breath, and dry ice from West Hollywood clubs. They primal screamed, sang Hare Krishna, and chanted Om. They coughed on exhaust fumes from shoddy cars on the 405, cars leaving the city limits, returning broken down people to unwanted hometowns. But make no mistake, the lungs breathe for you too. Now listen, just yesterday, they shouted at some asshole who cut you off on Wilshire Boulevard, and they confessed some of your lesser sins at church and told your best drunk stories at an AA meeting. But more than anything, they breathe the last vast expanse of expectations, the mosaic of aspirations imported by claustrophobic Easterners. Go west, young man. Oh, and they did. Burdened by the weight of history and crushed by the social registers, New Yorkers, New Jerseyans, and New Englanders, they left their old lives behind and headed further and further west, lured by the promise of freedom and sun-kissed flesh. They traveled further and further until they reached as far west as they could go. Driving along Pacific Coast Highway with the top down in a very cliched car, they breathed in that salty ocean breeze. This was a place where you could recreate history. People shunned by exclusive country clubs, the ones that were shut out of white shoe law firms, they could envision themselves in a new destiny. For worn-out East Coasters, the Pacific Ocean has always been about rebirth, baptism, and reinvention. The siren's call of this ocean is that you could be cleansed of your past. The problem is, some travelers, they just can't stop at the ocean's foamy edge. They fall for the con yet again, wandering in Norman Maine style, incapable of believing that this is it, that there is nothing further. No, there has to be something else in that ocean, sparkling under the sun like embezzled jewels. These travelers wander further and further, sinking down in the depths, refusing to believe that belief is not enough, and spreading the gospel, attracting new converts as they drown. But as the collective lungs of Los Angeles sustained years of jumbled fortunes, the hunger, the nervous energy, the fear and disappointment, they had tried to keep the generations of Angelenos afloat, and it wasn't easy. Because the lungs, like many people in LA, had been hiding their age the whole time. The truth was, these lungs were much, much older than they looked. They were tired of breathing in the possibilities, filtering out pollutants, and reassessed dreams. And as they sat on the coroner's table, waiting to be dissected, tested, and tossed into the vast heap of discarded ideas, bones, and history, the lungs breathed a sigh of relief.
Yeah.
Saara Dutton. Give it up, everybody.